Hi folks, this is all the fruit. Today I'm foraging in the promontory of Portofino, which is supposed to be one of the most beautiful areas of the Riviera. And since the Riviera is supposed to be one of the most beautiful areas in the world, after all, everybody who has a nice coastline names it Riviera after this area. So around here we should be in the best of the best of the best. Well, for the last 10 days I was on the Riviera di Ponente, the West Riviera, the area towards Monaco and France, and also in Monaco and France. Portofino is on the Riviera di Levante, the East Riviera. And immediately while walking around here I see something which I didn't see in the last 10 days in the West Riviera or anywhere in Monaco or in France. I see more or less proper Mediterranean spring vegetation. It's still a little bit puny, but at least it's green and has some flowers. Which is crazy because Italy and large parts of the Mediterranean were hit by quite a drought this year. And last year, of course, was the biggest drought in recorded history in Europe. So this is amazing, especially for a limestone promontory. Those walls there are made from limestone blocks, which is important because limestone, especially this limestone which breaks up into lots and lots of little pieces, is very permeable for water. It rains and the water sinks into the ground and then continues sinking into the rocks hundreds of meters into the rocks until it exits somewhere again. So first important thing here, it is quite lush. I see a lot of wild leeks. However, they didn't even, well, I'm not even exactly sure they are wild leeks because they didn't even try to produce any flowers. I see olives. Olives are basically the agricultural definition of the Mediterranean. Wherever you can grow olives, it's Mediterranean climate. To the south, the Sahara is too dry. To the east, the Arabian deserts are too dry and too cold. To the north, the Russian steppes and basically, the largest part of Eastern and Central Europe is too cold. And to the west, like France, Spain, Portugal and the British Isles, it's too wet. But wherever you have olive cultivation, you have Mediterranean climate. And as you can see over there, on the other side, all the beautiful old houses and the not so beautiful new houses are surrounded by olives. So we are here totally in the Mediterranean climate. Of course, we also have some more temperate fruit trees. Here is a blue plum. Down there I saw a cherry and a pear. Yeah, here you can see the cherry tree. Down there another plum tree. The deciduous hackberry, already with some fruits. And sarsaparilla, the favorite food of the Smurfs. The Smurfs are being shown eating the typical iconic leaves, but actually what you rather eat are the young stems. But I'm not even sure if this species, Smilax aspera, is indeed the edible one. Most probably wild beets, Beta maritima, although it's also possible that some beets were planted here, but I doubt it. This is the wild ancestor of the sugar beet. And how was this thing domesticated? Basically 200 something years ago, Napoleon ruled Europe. The Brits blockaded all of Europe. Not enough sugar came into Europe. So the French invented a method to make sugar out of beets. And the beet has been the dominant sugar production plant in Europe. Oh, by the way, down there, the stuff with the white flowers should be, I even forgot the English name, but the Latin name is, I also forgot the Latin name, but the Germans used to eat this a lot after World War II because it's an edible wheat which you cannot kill. Here is a pear tree, not in season. Blue cherry plum, also not in season. Hazelnut, also not in season. On this olive tree here, there is a grapevine also not in season. What is in season are the mandarins. However, there are so many brambles, not in season by the way, between me and the mandarins that I cannot forage them. Kiwi plant, not in season. Myrtle, not in season. A cherry, where is it? Everything's focusing on the... a cherry, slowly coming into season. And behind it, a kaki, which is not going to be in season for a long time. An apple tree. We hardly saw this at the Riviera di Ponente. Also the loquats are not as ripe as on the Riviera di Ponente. The reason could be that we are on a north-facing slope here. Some more blue plums. A chestnut tree. This is very significant because the chestnut doesn't like limestone, meaning that those rocks are probably not as basic as I thought. Although this here totally looks like water erosion on limestone. So very interesting. This chestnut is extremely interesting. A wild Laturo species, basically a small pea which you can forage, but if you eat too much, like in poor countries or in wartime, you get a disease called laturosis or laturism. Don't overdo it on the wild peas. Over there is the other chestnuts. That's very significant, folks. Always, no, not just the climate, but also the geology and the hydrology of an area. Then you know what you can forage around there. Well, you could definitely forage a lot of beets. I've rarely seen them so plentiful so far away from the sea. And here, a peach, the big pear tree behind it. And down there a lot of grapevines. And between them, a banana. The banana is also very significant. So why did I come here? Well, apart from the fact that Portofino is one of my favorite areas in all of Liguria and Italy, it was actually the first part of Liguria I ever visited, but I haven't revisited it now for 20 years. Sour cherry tree down there, not in season yet. Apart from that, Polypodium, the rhizome of this fern, is a very sweet substance, but for some reason it's not being used widely as a sugar substitute. Hazelnuts, not in season. Well, apart from that I like this area very much. I also, when I was and at the most subtropical parts of the Riviera di Liguria, like the area around Sanremo in the French border, I said a couple times, well, do you know another subtropical place worldwide where you can find all those subtropical fruits and even wild palm stands? Well, turns out there is such a place, and it's Portofino. It's not considered to be as subtropical as the southern part of the western Riviera. Such subtropical places on the Italian continent can be found only in the area of Naples, not further north. But it's still subtropical enough for most of those interesting fruits. And also it's apparently subtropical enough to house the northernmost wild palm stands in the whole wide world. Cherry trees, right next to them an avocado tree, not in season of course. Yeah, most of the foraging now in May at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada. Will be showing you trees and telling you what you can forage here later. But avocados and bananas at the same geographical latitude as Toronto basically, or Montreal, that's not a bad start, is it? At least in this lush vegetation we're gonna be able to forage a lot of spring greens, which are basically the staple of Mediterranean spring foraging. Not fruits, but spring greens. And on the Riviera di Ponente, it was so dry that I couldn't find basically any of those. Here, I feel confident. An elderberry, the flowers are as edible as the fruits, meaning you have to heat both first before you can eat them. I don't know what the unheated flowers will do to you, but the unheated fruits, you will hate it. It involves diarrhea and puking. Another chestnut in a limestone area. Yeah, undoubtedly limestone, the vegetation on it. It's also quite typical for limestone. That's amazing. It's amazing that it can survive here. Oh, and growing on it is a blue passion fruit. However, I see neither fruits nor flowers on this one. I see a couple buds. Where does it come from? Funny. Here a walnut tree. Also a rather temperate, but also doing quite well in the Mediterranean. If you're wondering why I'm panting all the time and why I'm the only one going in this direction on the trail, look at it behind me, a whole chestnut garden, and beneath me, behind this house, also chestnuts. That's amazing on this limestone. I cannot say it often enough. Usually limestone and chestnuts are mutually exclusive, except if it's very hard limestone, which this isn't, or a very moist area, which this shouldn't be. Well, why am I panting and I'm the only one going up this mountain? This nice little hike, a bit over 10 kilometers, a bit over 1,000 meters up and down. It's usually being done as a day hike. When I arrived at 4 p.m. at the nearby small train station, there were like 400 to 500 people waiting for the train. Most of them with hiking boots, most of them made this hike. But I want to be a clever one, and while a lot of rainstorms are coming, I wanna camp out somewhere in the forest. Guess I'm the only non-day hiker here. And that's why I have food and water for 2 days and 1 night with me. An almond. Right now, those are totally edible. As a young spring, well, I would call it a vegetable. It's a green fruit, it tastes like a vegetable. However, look at it, between the big young fruits, they are still the old almonds from last year, and I bet half of them will still be edible. Down here, Allium triquetrum, one of the most common wild onions in the Mediterranean. Really tasty. A little bit old, this one plant, for foraging right now, but others will still be good. Here the super toxic pokeweed from North America. Despite being super toxic, the stems and the leaves are being eaten after you detoxify it or you risk it. And it was basically introduced not for the stems or for the leaves, but for the fruits, which were used to dye wine. Like when your red wine doesn't turn out red but brown, you save it with this thing and then you don't drink it yourself. You sell this toxic shit. If they catch you dyeing wine to be more red with those pokeweed berries, nowadays you go to prison. Because they killed a lot of people with this. Nowadays they dye it red with bugs and chemicals, which are a lot less harmful. Here we have an introduced invasive wood sorrel, the purple flowers, really tasty, but be careful, it contains a lot of oxalate. And up here, lemons and kumquats. The Italians invented, basically they bred the lemon from the citron and the bitter orange, and then the Italians bred hundreds of lemon varieties. Here is the kumquat. I always thought that the kumquat is a very heat-loving plant, but it's actually one of the most tolerant of the citruses. A lot of papers don't put it even in the genus Citrus, but in the genus Fortunella. Another wild leek. This could be Allium roseum. I forgot, does Allium roseum have bulbs in its inflorescence? Well, you can check. If Allium roseum has bulbs in inflorescence, it should be Allium roseum. Otherwise, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of closely related species in the Mediterranean. Those cherries here are starting to get into season. What is the reason for all those chestnuts here? It's incredible. It's the most incredible thing I've seen here yet. And I doubt I'll see the palm here, by the way, white mulberry, a couple trees. I kind of doubt big flowering quince. It's flowering, but in autumn it will be fruiting and the things are totally edible. And here's some prickly pear or opancha, edible fruits and stems. And here actually what is it called? This thing with the big arctium is the Latin name. This thing with the hooks on the fruit. This is also edible and it's being cultivated in East Asia, but not in Europe. What did I want to say? Well, here in this lush valley, there is no chance for me to find the northernmost palm stands in the whole wide world, because this is not an oasis palm or a forest palm. It's a palm of hot, dry, south-facing cliffs. But it's good that they have a long ascent here. Not because it's hot, it's not. It's freaking cold actually. But because I can show you all the lush vegetation. Even surprised that the olives are so doing well in this valley. Oh, big deciduous oak over there. Big deciduous oak growing so close down to the sea. Also means that there is quite a lot of rain here. I wouldn't have seen anything like this on the Riviera di Ponente. You know what's amazing? We've seen olives all the time and citruses, but apart from that, cherries, plums, apples, pears, that's the first time we are seeing figs, which is actually a much more common fruit tree in the hot, sunny parts of the Mediterranean than apples, for example. What is this crazy climate? It seems to be good enough for olives and citruses, which are usually much more susceptible to cold and wet weather. It doesn't seem to be so good for figs. The climate and geology of this area really surprised me. I'm glad I came here. Let's see if the rainstorm hits me at night at some exposed trail, if I'm still gonna be that happy. Okay folks, good news. There's spring soar along the way. Guess who brought a lot of water with him? And guess who has like 1200 meters up and 1200 meters down? That's gonna be fun. Look at that, an out of season bay leaf or laurel tree fruiting profusely. There are cherry species which look exactly like this tree. One of them is called the laurel cherry or the cherry laurel. Well, the bay leaf, well, I've actually never used the fruits, but the leaves, as a spice. However, here we're gonna at least try the fruits. It's supposed to be, well, really astringent, like the peel of a mango, like a really astringent mango peel, or a really astringent avocado. The aftertaste is horribly bitter, definitely not considered edible. More Allium triquetrum, still totally fresh enough to be foraged. Never saw anything like this at the Riviera di Ponente, just a couple other Allium species where the leaves were usually mostly gone already. An apricot, a peach, behind the apple. At least the apple would be kind of exceptional in the parts of the Riviera I spent the last 8 days. This is not a dwarf palm, Himalaya palm, Trichycarpus fortunei, but it looks like it's been attacked by the palm weevil. And this blue plum here was grafted on a red leaf ornamental cherry plum Here you can see a sucker from the cherry plum. And I had a question about oleander today. This one is not flowering or fruiting. You can recognize it by the leaves. It's native to Italy. Grows basically like a willow in riverbeds. But it's horribly toxic. Stay away from this popular ornamental. Underneath it, several species of invasive wood sorrel, which is, unlike the oleander, totally edible. And here a young feral apple tree. Somebody threw away his apple remnants, and the tree grew from them. Is it an apple or a plum? No, it's definitely an apple. I guess here the same happened with the cherry plum in this spot with trillium, and here possibly the same happened with the loquat in this spot with ivy, or it's possible that they plant young trees on purpose together with those ornamentals. Also, look at this lush forest, mostly deciduous oaks. Down there in the valley, I walked along a very beautiful little creek, but I couldn't film because I really had to pee. But it was a nice lush creek with geese and herons and stuff inside. And having deciduous forests here, and even there on this mountain by the sea, actually cannot be explained by the climate alone. The climate should favor, well, yeah, actually, yes, it can be explained by the climate. The area is mild enough so that evergreen oak forests should be favored, because evergreen oak forests are the definition of Mediterranean climate. You have evergreen oaks here, but deciduous oaks and other deciduous trees are dominating. I guess the reason is not the frost, because you have olives growing here. They are just as susceptible as the evergreen oaks. That's why the olives are the second definition of Mediterranean climate. Mediterranean climate is basically where you can grow olives and where the dominant forests are evergreen oaks. I think because Europe and the Mediterranean are in the southwest wind zone, the southwest facing Riviera de Levante gets a lot more rain than the southeast facing Riviera di Ponente, which is in the rain shadow of the Alps. So basically the same coastline theoretically, almost as mild as the Riviera di Ponente, but maybe with twice as much rain. I know that, well, not those hills, but the hills behind them, some of them actually reach 2,000 millimeters. 2,000 millimeters is the official threshold for rainforest. So they are not considered tropical rainforest, because up there it's quite cold and not tropical at all. But theoretically, some southwestern slopes of the higher mountains behind those hills, yeah, can be considered rainforest climate, at least rainforest precipitation amounts. By the way, I've arrived in a tiny village of San Rocco, 200 meters above. Oh, look at this rainstorm over there. Oh my. I'm sure a couple of those are gonna hit us too. See the rainstorm there behind the ships? And even Genoa is getting its part of the storm, but it's strongest here above the bay, well, above the open sea in this case. There is sunshine. The funny thing is, right now, yeah, normally this rainstorm should come towards us, but right now, despite being in the middle of May, it's horribly cold for the season, and all the rain is coming from behind the mountains. So I hope that here in Portofino we'll have a completely unusual situation where the mountains actually don't amplify the rain, but protect us a little bit from the rain. However, it doesn't seem to work completely, as we can see. Well, anyways, I'm now 200 meters above the sea and above the train station. From here, there are no roads, just those trails. The first couple kilometers, I remember that they are still accessible for very small vehicles. After that, it's just gonna be for pedestrians, and the single houses along the way, they are mostly accessible by the sea. And look at the nice avocado trees here. They are flowering. I think avocado flowers produce a lot of nectar and a lot of honey. But yeah, no avocado fruits right now. And here sour cherries. Oh, the old Italian hikers, they are pointing at my shoes and laughing and shaking their heads. What's the problem, folks? Those are the tactical Crocs. Oh, by the way, after a couple kilometers, it's not gonna be an asphalted way anymore. It's gonna be a bit of a via ferrata. You need a lot of metal ropes to climb along the cliffs to stay on the trail. That's gonna be fun. It's gonna be big fun, folks. Here we are still not on the south facing slopes. Until now we were on the north facing slopes. Now we are on the west facing slopes. Still a lot of precipitation, but you can see also a lot of evergreen oaks down there, especially in the lower parts. Yeah, even the smallest space is used here to give the hiker some foraging. But I'm so clever to have brought everything with me. Here a wild pistachio species, by the way. The terebinth or turpentine pistachio. This one looks a little bit strange. I had very strange pistachios on the Riviera di Ponente, and here it's continuing with very strange looking pistachios. This one, by the way, doesn't produce edible pistachio fruits. Lonaria rediviva, Chinese money. Those are the young fruits of this year, and the ones of last year are already not beautiful and a little bit moldy, but a couple of them are still a bit shiny. Chinese like to grow this, it seems, because the silver-like round flat fruits symbolize money and wealth. The plant is in the mustard family, so all of it should be edible while still young enough. Closer to the sea, drier slopes. This one is almost vertical. I wouldn't dare climb here. It's almost vertical, and as you can see, pretty much only evergreen oaks on this one. Very dry and exposed because of the almost vertical structure. Above me, the slopes are not that vertical anymore, and mostly deciduous trees. Flowering ash and invasive black locust, and in the background also deciduous oaks. More moisture, more soil. Deciduous oaks and other deciduous trees dominating. In the steep exposed areas, there is the evergreen holm oak. Look at that abandoned little restaurant with the amazing view over the sea. Could save me from this night storm. Nah, it's still early. It's not even 5 o'clock yet. I'm gonna press on. The one plant every Italian without exception forages in spring is the asparagus, the wild asparagus, Asparagus albus, also called the white asparagus. The young shoots of this one are unsurpassed in taste. There is no asparagus cultivar that can compete with it, can compare to it. And although we have billions, probably trillions of those plants growing throughout Italy, and spring millions of Italians are foraging them, so it's almost impossible to find good quality ones, except if you have a huge area of exposed limestone rock with a big fence around it. Rumex crispus, or another closely related species. This is a dock, an edible dock with tasty sourish leaves. However, I think that this one here, the smaller ones are Rumex sanguineus, a bitter species here. Docks, you have nice sour species like the common sorrel, and then you have those bitter ones which are not suitable. They are not just bitter, they are also toxic. The brambles are not in season, and the young stems are already too old to be eaten. So the only one that remains for me right now are the petals. Forgot the name of this wild pea here. One of my favorite Mediterranean flowers because it's really beautiful and really looks like a pea. Flowers young stems, young fruits. The seeds in older fruits are theoretically edible, but don't overdo it because of the laturism. Can do the same with the smaller species here. I forgot all the names, I used to know them. Also kind of ediblish, but overdo it, you'll get poor man's diseases, which rich people who can afford to buy beans and peas don't get. But poor people who forage too many of those fabaceae, they can die of those things. A wild gladiole over there, really beautiful. And a nice little shed in the forest. Maybe I'm gonna sleep under a roof tonight. Abandoned agricultural lands. Cultivating tourists is much easier than cultivating fruit trees. So a lot of those steep areas are being abandoned. I mean, you can feed tourists with imported food and tell them it's local. They will not be able to recognize it. Not everything is abandoned, however. Here somebody is still holding on to the little house. Look at that. That little tank. Maybe I will fit in this thing, but yeah, that's how they get their goods and services up here. With little caterpillars. Beautiful old loquat tree. It's interesting that they are much less ripe on the Riviera di Ponente. They were completely ripe. Here they are still half ripe. And here the sweet oranges are still hanging on the trees. And even some of the mandarins. A lot more than in the Riviera di Ponente. Also here I see a lot more of those temperate things like chestnuts. It's not just that this area is a little bit more prone to frosts. It's also the moisture that makes them cultivate so many more deciduous fruit trees. Oh yeah, old memories. My son was a baby and I was carrying him when I walked here for the first and the last time until now. Now he's like shy of 7 feet tall and a lot more work than he was as a baby. Edible prickly pears, plums, mandarins, a tree mallow. Each part is edible as long as it's still tender enough. Another bay leaf, more oranges and lemons, a kaki tree behind them. Here a kiwi. I remember when I walked here, this reminded me of photos from the Canary Islands, and indeed it looks like places on the northern slopes of the Canary Islands, although usually higher than 200 meters above sea level. In the Canary Islands we could have a similar countryside at about 600 meters above sea level, or maybe 800 meters above sea level, but with less olives because they don't like the rain and moisture and fog in those areas. But apart from the olives, yeah, it looks like the Canary Islands. Here a kaki tree from close up. Good drinking water everywhere. They have a heavy backpack full of bottles with me. Carried them up the mountain. I'm not abandoning them. I want to sleep on the southern side of the mountain. I doubt it's going to be as water rich as the western slopes. Crazy. The next little hamlet. Road sometimes barely a meter wide. Here a chocolate vine. Kiwi quinata. A lily pilly behind it. Here another pistachio species, a mastix. The sap of this thing is the chewing gum that people masticated for millennia before Wrigley's made a new recipe. Also people like here to hang bromelias, tillandsias in the trees. That means that this area is a lot of moisture in the air. Also totally different from the Riviera di Ponente. There, those tillandsias wouldn't be able to survive without watering. Also like those tiny details. You run out of space in the village you just built above the tiny donkey paths. Pomegranate. Buongiorno. Peach, apricot, kaki, loquat, elderberry, and hazelnut mandarin. Yeah, also the walls are covered with ferns. It's also a sign for a lot of moisture, a lot of rain, and also a lot of fog. Beautiful. If the climate was a little bit milder, I would like to live in this hamlet without cars, probably with super loud motorbikes. Here a blue passion fruit, well, blue passion flower. It's flowering right now. In summer, it will be covered with tasty orange fruits. They are not the tastiest passion fruit, but probably got introduced to Europe before the other ones, so they are the most common one around here. And here, a little vineyard. And tillandsias in the trees again, folks. Mind those tillandsias. They are showing us a lot about the climate. Those are the only plants that can suck up water through their leaves. They don't need roots. Other epiphytes, other plants that are growing on trees still need a small patch of soil where their roots can suck up water. But the tillandsias, they suck water from the fog through their leaves. Since they grow here, look, over there is a huge one on this cherry plum. Since they grow that well here, this area must have really moist air. Also amazing apple trees, plum trees, cherry trees, kiwis. Kiwis also like a lot of water. Walnut trees over there. This area, this promontory is sticking. You see the coast here? It's basically, it doesn't have so many big bays, but this promontory here is sticking 5 meters into the sea. And it's about it's sticking 5 kilometers into the sea, and it's 500 meters tall. Guess this promontory is catching a lot of wind. Also, always look at the olive trees. No ancient olive trees here. This one, the oldest stem, still should be well under 100 years old. Here, no old stems. The olive trees are basically growing like bushes. On the Riviera di Ponente, you have olive trees. Some of them are considered to be over 800 years old. I would say they are rather 1200 years old. You don't see such stems here. In many parts of the Mediterranean, which are not as mild as other ones, but still totally Mediterranean, about every 40 years there is a frost of colder than minus 17 degrees. And this one usually kills the above ground olives. So when you look at the olives, you can basically, they are like a data logger which logs the climate data for the last few hundred years. If you have stems, not trees, because the roots can be much older. If you have olive stems which are 1,000 years old, then for the last 1,000 years you probably had no frost much under minus 15 degrees. If you have a lot of olives everywhere, like here, the area is still totally good enough for the cultivation of olives. But if they are all more shrub-like than tree-like, look at that, most of the older trees have several stems. That means that every couple decades you are being hit by quite a nasty cold. The border area between France and Italy, Menton, Bordighera, Ventimiglia, in some areas they haven't had frost throughout the 20th century. Here they definitely did have frost throughout the 20th century because it killed the olive stems and the trees resprouted from the roots. So folks, not only do you need to know what climate you have in an area to know what fruits you can forage, but when you watch the trees and the fruits, you can see what climate you have, and you can see what climate you have had for hundreds of years, which then again will help you knowing what fruits you can forage without looking in any books or tasty stuff, without looking at any books. Oh, no. websites. I guess here it's over for caterpillars and bikes. From here on, it's just on foot. What is really impressing me that here, well, if I look behind me, yeah, there are a couple olives. But if I look around me right here, all the species I can see would be species I can also see in my native Balkan mountains, in areas where you get minus 25, minus 30 degrees every couple winters. Here basically, yeah, hazelnut, walnut, blackberries, parietaria, come on, what's the name of this thing? Not ranunculus, but helleborus. The ferns, the selection of ferns, the selection of herbs, everything is almost the same as in South European mountains, which are colder than the North Cap, colder than parts, well, not colder on average, but which have colder frost than parts of Alaska. Also very lush vegetation. I think the reason you have this vegetation here in an area with very little frost is the ample amount of water. Look at that. There is a little creek coming down here, just like in the Balkan mountains. Look at how lush the brambles are. I peel this one with my teeth. And then I can eat the tasty, tender inside. Nice. The other part is a little bit tart, but it's gonna get better when I go to the fresher part. Here, a feral red leaf cherry plum. Good stuff. A little bit tart, but still good stuff. Here, again, mostly evergreen stuff on former agricultural terraces, but still too lush. I will not find wild dwarf palms here in this area. Nope. Oh, Melittis melisophyllum. Nice aromatic herb. Also growing in very cold areas of Bulgaria. Yeah, a lot of the stuff here can grow with much harsher frost than they get here. Dogwood, common European dogwood. Feral, yeah, those are feral sour cherries, Prunus cerazos. Whole population of them. Crazy. Those daisies, there are a couple other species which look like daisies. I think they are all edible. Now, for the dwarf palm, to get it grows in the hottest, driest parts of the Mediterranean. Now here, I am at one of the northernmost parts of the Mediterranean. So I have to find the hottest, driest slopes possible. And those here are neither hot nor dry enough. Feral red leaf cherry plum. Unlike other plums, the unripe fruits of the cherry plum are totally tasty. It's feral because it's growing out of the wall here. The other plums, because of their blackthorn heritage, I've eaten a lot of unripe blackthorn fruits, but they are not very tasty. But the cherry plum fruits, very tasty while young. Here the variety with normal colored leaves and normal colored fruits. Tasty. And wild peas. I love this stuff. I love to stuff my face with this stuff. Fruits, flowers, leaves. Just don't overdo it, folks. I'm a big, well-fed guy, so my body can totally take that, but half-starved people who are constantly over years in a survival situation and eat too much latures, they get They with bad conditions. Good stuff. Feral lockbutt. Too young for fruits, unfortunately. Let's see what other feral fruit trees I will find. It will be crazy if I manage to find feral citruses. They're quite rare in the Mediterranean. Look at that. An older feral lockbutt hanging full of fruits. However, they're only half ripe. Good that I foraged a lot of lockbutts yesterday and munched a lot of them this morning, so I'm not too desperate for lockbutts right now. I'll wait till the southern slope. Look at this. In this valley, Austria carpinifolia is dominating those tall trees. The funny thing is, in some parts of Liguria, you can also still find original Mediterranean forest. This is a mixed Mediterranean forest, a mix between evergreen and summergreen trees. It's not original because here the terraced slopes, because of the ample rain, it repopulated, reconquered slopes which were totally agricultural about 100 years ago. Look, one rubble wall, second rubble wall above it. Probably no rubble walls down there. Yes, there were rubble walls even down there. Look at the terraces. But within 100 years, the forest grew again to 25, 30 meters tall. I've seen this a couple times here in Liguria, sometimes even with evergreen laurel trees and stuff. You have a macchia where the laurels are like 4 meters tall, then suddenly you have a deep valley, but the macchia doesn't sink together with the valley. Suddenly the laurels and holm oaks are 25 meters tall. Amazing. There are not many parts of the Mediterranean where you can still see more or less good intact forests, or forests which have reconquered agricultural areas. I like that. However, folks, that's not only good. Yeah, forest reconquering agricultural areas. On the first glance, that's a good thing. And it is a good thing in a way. But those agricultural areas in the Mediterranean, after thousands of years of cultivation, are also incredibly biodiverse. Imagine all the little grasses, herbs and flowers, all the little bugs and beetles and grasshoppers that like the sunny, hot conditions of those agricultural terraces. Most of them cannot survive in the forest here. So sometimes a forest reconquering those areas is a good thing for biodiversity. But actually, in my nature conservation department at university decades ago, we're also discussing how to cut down Mediterranean forests again to establish agricultural terraces, because otherwise a lot of biodiversity will go down. Look at that. See this asparagus? Somebody foraged it weeks ago, and then the young side shoots developed. They have foraged one of those side shoots also, but left the others, not because of consideration, but probably because they are too thin and not tasty enough. But that's what you see all over Italy in spring. The main asparagus shoots being foraged by the Italians, and then the side shoots only surviving because they are not tasty enough. They are too thin and too woody because they are developed too late when it's already getting dry. Yeah. So there have been foragers on this trail before me. Italians are great foragers, folks. When in Rome or in all of Italy, do as the Romans or the Italians and learn from them how to forage tasty spring greens like this Allium triquetrum, very easy to recognize by the triangular stem. And incredibly tasty. Tastes like a nice mild, soft garlic. Here we have a yam, Tamos communis, from the yam family, Dioscoreaceae. But I want to show you one with fruits too. And here again, an asparagus albus, see? They have foraged the main stem, but left the side stems because they are not tasty enough. Funny that there is a similar thing with the Chinese, the Asian bird's nests. You collect the bird's nest of the swiftlets in Southeast Asia and put it into a Chinese soup. The swiftlets are in a hurry. Their new nest doesn't have this good quality. There are a lot more plants and dirt inside to build it faster. So the second generation nests are not being collected so that the birds can still breed. Same thing with asparagus. You collect the good quality early spring shoot, the side shoots. You will mostly leave them be just because they are not of that good quality. See, a sunny spot around here and nice doggies. But look behind me. The biodiversity of the more or less natural forest. Natural forest would be even darker than this. Very low biodiversity. Only asparagus, sarsaparilla and yam growing on the ground. And if the forest had recovered properly, even those would be more or less absent. Here, by the way, a strawberry tree, Arbutus unedo. But once you get into the sunny spots, here Veronica chamedris, Veronica toicrium, chamedris. And aromatic nice herbs that like sun. A lot of different ferns and herbs. A salvia here, a thyme. Lots and lots of ferns, lots of young trees, grasses. Well, those sunny conditions you would also have on the agricultural walls or in the orchards. See how much higher the diversity on those disturbed areas is? That's why I'm happy. Oh, look, wild roses here. Wild Mediterranean roses. That's why I'm happy that the forests are reconquering the agricultural land. But it shouldn't happen everywhere, because then you get the dark forest with the... They have a very high diversity of mushrooms, for example, because of the moisture. Veronica toicrium? No, I forgot what this. Those dark forests have a very high diversity of mushrooms, for example, but the diversity of flowering plants and of animals, especially insects. Here, for example, a chistus with beautiful white flowers. Imagine a slope with hundreds of millions of those white flowers, one of the most beautiful things in the Mediterranean. See, the disturbed area, much more biodiverse than the intact forest. This is one of the big dilemmas of the nature conservationists. What would I like? An intact forest where people can get timber and clean air and clean water, or a disturbed, degraded forest where biodiversity can thrive. Let's see if somebody foraged those asparaguses here. Oh yeah, and very recently too. This one was foraged in the last days. Those here were foraged many weeks ago. This and this and this were also foraged many weeks ago. I told you folks, every Italian, they are basically hardwired that way. They see an asparagus in spring and they have to check for young shoots and they have to forage them. It's in their blood. See, this one has been foraged, the later one has been left alone. Those two have been foraged. It's in their blood, folks. They are hardwired to do this, and I cannot blame them, because those wild asparagus shoots are among the tastiest things you can find in the Mediterranean nature. And Mediterranean nature is very rich in tasty things. Speaking of the devil, chickweed. Is it true chickweed? Yes, only one row of hairs. It's not a typical Mediterranean thing, but one of my favorite salads. If you have enough moisture and no frost, you can harvest this thing all year long. It tastes nice and nutty and salady and good salad. This one is a little bit dry. It's not perfect. But good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Once again, an Italian has been here. Well, easy to say, we are in Italy. This asparagus has been foraged, and then weeks later the side branches have been foraged. Those two down there have also been foraged. That's how you can recognize if an Italian was here. Watch the asparagus. Watch the asparagus if you want to catch the Italian. That's basically how I managed foraging on the Riviera. Showing you a lot of trees with out of season with things which are not in season, but at least showing you a lot of greens you can eat which are in season. However, on the Riviera di Ponente it was so dry. A yuga. You can also totally eat those things. And here, St. John's wort. Good tea against winter depression, but if you drink it now in late May, you'll get sunburn. Makes your skin more susceptible to the sun. That's why in winter it will reduce the winter depression. Here another one. Will reduce the winter depression, but in summer it will reduce the winter depression so much that you get sunburn. Black nightshade, no fruits on this. Europeans think it's toxic. The Asians collect and eat the fruits, even the green ones, which are toxic. But the Africans, they would collect the leaves and make them into a spinach, to a bitter spinach, which they like a lot. But no African has been here. However, an Italian has been here. See, the asparagus has been foraged weeks ago. If I see this thing being foraged and there are no goats or other obvious culprits around, then I know that some of the Africans who live around here have been foraging and hiking. But this is again the trace of an Italian, a foraged asparagus. I really wanted to show you this, and I was so unhappy that at the Riviera di Ponente I couldn't. Look, another foraged asparagus. Italians have been here. Lots of Italians, because this one has been foraged too. Well, myrtle shrubs. However, they are tiny and puny. One here, one here. It's too shady for them already. And here, a horrible pest. Oh! Konica albida started showing up regularly in Germany around 15 years ago. They started recording it and publishing it. And the last years it has become a horrible pest. And we thought it's just because of the climate change. But then I talked to people in southern Portugal, basically frost-free areas, and they said, yeah, in our area it also has become a pest only in the last 5 to 10 years. Then I talked to a guy, my Dixie Rect, who said that in the Midwest of the US this thing has also become a pest in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe a little bit longer over there. All those places knew this plant before, but it became a pest only in recent years, probably with hybridization and mutation. And now they say both from here again, Italians have foraged the asparagus, and here too. Both from southern Portugal and here too, and from the American Midwest, more asparagus has been foraged here. They say that this stuff has become resistant to pesticides in the last years. And the Americans say they tried everything. You know what works? Agent Orange, the stuff they used on the Viet Cong. But this thing, a very dangerous weed. I also saw it in equatorial areas in Borneo and in continental Malaysia. A weed that's a noxious weed in Borneo, in the American Midwest, in frost-free areas of the Mediterranean, and in cold Germany, is a horrible weed indeed. Ha! The Italians have missed this one. See? This is the small part I can forage here from this one. A nice, well-fed, well-watered wild asparagus will produce a tip much bigger than this one. This is like more or less on the lower end of the scale. Yeah, somebody has collected even a lot of small ones. Those is on the lower end of the scale people would collect. Also, you need to boil it just for a very short time, 1 or 2 minutes. But I will eat one unboiled. Here, by the way, strawberry tree. It doesn't have real strawberries, but the fruits are called, because of the fruits, it's called a strawberry tree, because they are big and reddish and soft. Here another one. However, this area is still far too lush for dwarf palms, far too lush. Yeah, here another strawberry tree. Corbessolo in Italian, Arbusier in French, Madroño in Spanish. They even named their capital Madrid after this tree. Look, this old asparagus thing, even this one has been foraged. Toicrium chamedris, a beautiful flower. Now I have it finally, a beautiful flower. And here, 2 foraged asparagus, by the way. But here it's too shady for it to even flower, and it will disappear after a couple years. Yeah, also a thing that grows in Germany and in the cold Balkan mountains. So amazing. There are a couple things here which need mild climate, but most of the species can grow in horribly cold places in the Balkan mountains too. Here, by the way, you can see pretty much all of the Riviera di Ponente. Over there is Genova. Then this light, this ray of light, which is actually reflected of raindrops, that's all the Riviera di Ponente. And then, oops, let's go underneath this terebinth tree. Here you can see the Alps above the reflections of the sun in the water. The Alps mountains and the Riviera di Ponente, which is usually protected from the rain. Only right now, when the rain is coming from the northeast and not from the southwest, they are probably going, maybe they are going to get more than us. You never know. Here again the terebinth, this wild pistachio species which produces the terebinth sap, but it doesn't produce edible pistachios, unfortunately. That pine tree, and down there one surviving pine tree, remnants of failed afforestation. Well, did they try to plant pine trees here instead of the local trees? Well, you can see that most of the local trees are small, short and crooked, while those big boys here, well, they were good quality timber. Actually, some of them even grow to amazing sizes, but drought, insects and fire, the pine trees are much more susceptible to those. And so, yeah, for now, only one of those many trees successfully survived, and I guess it's never gonna get cut down and harvested. The tree header, Erica arborea. Actually, this one, just like the strawberry tree and the wild pistachios, the mastics and the lentisk. Well, no, the mastics and the lentisk are the same, so the mastics / lentis and the terebinth. Those used to be full-size trees, and actually old records, for example, in the Odyssey, when they say what Odysseus and other guys built their ships from, they totally used those things, which nowadays are usually crooked shrubs, but back then were full-sized trees, and each one had its special properties as a timber for different parts of the ship. Well, they also used pine, but it was never considered a very high quality timber. Look at that, a feral peach tree. Somebody threw away the stone of a peach, and now we have a tree growing here, even producing lots of fruits, if somebody is brave enough to harvest them over this vertical gully. Nice gully, but in strong rains this must become torrential. Cannot find a nice big yam with berries. My grandfather once sent me out to collect a lot of those berries to infuse them in alcohol, just for rubbing alcohol. Apparently the berries have some medicinal properties. You cannot eat them, they are toxic. However, in times of famine, the sizable tuber was eaten. It's a yam after all. If you know how to properly detoxify it, you can eat it. I don't know how to properly detoxify it, and if you're not 100% sure you know how to do it, don't do it, or you're gonna suffer or even die. Magnificent, this light deciduous forest of Austria, of water beech and flowering ash on those giant cliffs, and with all those vines. The vines are mostly sarsaparilla, and those cliffs and boulders are gigantic going down here. This must be an area where a lot of water is flowing down this cliff, otherwise this forest wouldn't be able to survive here. And it's surviving so well, it's outcompeted all the evergreen trees and even all the smaller trees. The tree crowns are 15 meters above the rocks. Wonder why so much water is coming down right here. Another mystery of this beautiful area here. Look at this tiny pillbox. Probably World War II. I'm finally arriving. Haven't arrived yet on the southern slope. This here is still too lush for... Oh, there is the last tourist boat. Bye bye. Cannot go home to my nice hotel anymore. Guess I have to sleep here in the hills. Well, anyway, here you can see large part of the western slope of Portofino, here with those tiny hamlets. They continue down there where they have access to the sea. In the upper part, cliffs, failed pine tree afforestation. Those cliffs are still not hot and harsh enough for dwarf palm. Remember, we are here at the absolute northernmost worldwide distribution of palms, so only the most extreme habitats will do. An artillery battery with small pillbox, which has been, like all the pillboxes, turned into a toilet. Here, this is still a macchia, but quite a low macchia. Basically, the two first stages of degradation of Mediterranean forests are macchia and garrigue. Macchia still has basically all the tree species and can turn back into a forest. For the garrigue, it's much more difficult. Let's see what we have here. Well, we have mastics and myrtle and heather and flowering ash. Strawberry tree ahead. Down there we have a couple terebinths and oaks. So I guess, yes, this area. Also, in a macchia, you walk through the macchia. Look at that, a lot of those things are taller than me. In a garrigue, you walk above it. It's basically small shrubs reaching usually only up to your knees or to your waist. So both of those criteria, the forest species, the forest tree species, and the height fit. We are here still in a macchia, not in a garrigue. Oh, look at that. A nice, I even forgot the name of this clover. And here we have bracken. Bracken, a fern you might know from, the British Isles or Scandinavia. It grows in the Mediterranean. It even grows, it's quite abundant in some equatorial areas in Borneo. One of the few plant species with a truly global distribution. What is this battery here? Well, I know that there was a battery here, but is this a shelter or what is it? Centro Visite. How beautiful. Even with a spot that can protect you from the sun, but not from the rain. And a water fountain. And who is carrying a ton of water? Well, not a ton of water, but I still have 2 full bottles in his backpack. Yeah, guess who? Difficult trail ahead. Read information carefully. I did. Now we are talking business. We have reached the southern slope of the Portofino promontory. As you can see, a lot more rocks visible. Not really a dense forest anymore, but a loose cover with rocks and grassy patches in between. Still a macchia, and also still a lot more deciduous trees than in similar areas in the Riviera di Ponente, over there behind those grasses. I was there 200 kilometers away this morning. Yeah, over there a lot drier here because the winds usually come from there and hit this slope. They are bringing enough water for more vegetation, but you can still see it's the exposed hot southern slope. And here I still don't see an area which would be good for dwarf palms. There should be 3 populations here. By the way, here in front there has been a fire a couple years ago. See all the skeletons of the burned trees or shrubs? Yeah, without those fires, a lot of areas in the Mediterranean would have already returned to their traditional forested state.